Hello, everyone. My name is David Reed. Welcome back to Dial the Gates, the Stargate Oral History Project. Robert C. Cooper is joining us for his 11th episode, and we are finally finishing out SG-1. We're going to talk about 200. We're going to talk about Unending. A huge chunk of the reason why I do this show, why I continue to do this show, is to have conversations with key people, particularly this man. I am so proud of the amount of time that we've spent together and the content that has resulted from it, the stories that have come out of it. So we are nearly done. I may have maybe another episode for him. I hope to have him back for Q&As here and there with you guys if the show continues for a few more years. But for the core content, this is almost it, and I think you're going to find a lot of insight. So I'm not going to hold him off any longer. Let's bring in writer, director, executive producer, Robert C. Cooper. Robert C. Cooper, writer, director, executive producer, Stargate. Sir, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you for coming back.
Always fun.
I have been talking with a number of fans lately, and a couple of more esoteric things have been coming up that I realized that we've never really discussed. And I wanted to start with a fun one. You and I have never talked about where Indeed came from. Do you have any notion as to who the real culprit for this madness is?
Honestly, no.
Okay.
I don't. I can only imagine that it was, oftentimes an actor will deliver a line in a way that has a twist to it that's the rest of the actors react to. And then that reaction, leads to it becoming a thing, right? Like we did not write Doe. Rick just threw that in at some point. And I think, we were like, well, can we even do that?
Right? Yeah. Is it copyright? Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm sorry. I don't remember where that came from, other than obviously Chris's delivery on a lot of different things had a real kind of, would become a meme these days.
Right. Oh, and it is that meme of him sitting across. I'm sure you've seen it, sitting across from Saul Rubinek on camera, just is everywhere. And I think it's Stargate's #1 meme. And the actor obviously enjoyed it. Otherwise he probably would have been like, okay, guys, I don't like the delay. And it makes me wonder about certain things like with Rick. Where does Rick end and O'Neill begin? In terms of fictional characters, I can't see a line blurred more greater than that. Because at a certain point, he's there to have a good time and make a good show. And where do you tell?
Shout out to Richard Dean Anderson, who just celebrated his 75th birthday.
75.
Happy birthday, Rick.
Yes. Yeah. It's just one of those things that the show is remembered for, that you didn't intentionally go in there to create. It's just something that kind of happens because you have the right talent.
Yeah, and was, often for me anyways, very surprising. Mm-hmm. He was a hard guy to predict, and I think sometimes his tendency to, swerve left when you expected him to swerve right was not because he preferred left to right, but because it was going to keep you on your toes.
That's right.
So, yeah, I think that, like, we talked about the fact that, in my first real close interaction working with him, I had written Fifth Race and was very nervous about showing him the script and getting notes from him the first time, because he had so much time with the puppet, and
if he doesn't buy it, it's not going to work.
Well, it turned out he loved it. He loved working with the puppet. I didn't expect that at all. So, unpredictable was really the hallmark of Richard Dean Anderson.
He, Tom McBeath, and Rick, Tom sat down. If I told you this story, stop me. Tom talked about a scene where they were at Senator Kenzie's house, and his wife answers the front door, and he says, "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Mr. Starsky. This is Hutch." And Tom said, "That wasn't in the script." And he recalls Rick looking at him saying, how you gonna react to that, huh? And I think Rick enjoyed Tom's, i.e. Mayborn's, just like blank stares. Like, how am I supposed to respond to this? You know?
Well, also, like, with Rick, sarcasm could be a form of affection. Like that's how he expressed affection. If you were worthy of him, directing sarcasm at you, or sometimes it was just sarcasm.
Jeez. I have never asked you about something that I've heard in other shows eats up development time. And I hope, if you don't mind me going into the nuts and bolts a little bit, episode titles. Did you have, this is something I've never discussed with any of you. Did you have parameters in terms of creating episode titles? On Seinfeld, it was one of the things that Larry David always said, this is why the episode titles are so boring. I don't want my writers to be spending time coming up with creative episode titles. I want them to be coming up with good story.
Well,
what were your rules? Did you have any?
Well, I actually don't remember when or how it came about, but at some point somebody decided that we were actually going to put the episode titles on the episodes. Like, they appeared in credits, right? At the beginning of the episode, it would say the title. That was a very sort of old-fashioned TV thing to do. They don't do that at all anymore. It's only for the sake of, I think, Wikipedia that you now have episode titles at all.
Universe doesn't have them.
No. Well, because at some point we would be sitting there talking about whether the title was good or not, and somebody would say, "Well, who cares?" And we go, "Oh yeah, right. It's going on the screen." Yeah. So yeah, there was. I mean, at the end of the day, no, we did not spend a lot of time, and it did not throw us into cause the day to get wasted away as we bantied around the title. It's usually, in fact, I feel like in some ways, more often than not, the title went hand in hand with the idea that was originally pitched. So if the pitch survived, the title survived. There were a few, only, I think, a few times that we would either for one reason or another decide that the title couldn't or wouldn't work for some reason, and then have to think of a new one. So yeah, you often would come in with a title attached to the idea.
Okay. Joseph Malazzi, I don't know if I've asked you this. He's on record for 48 hours. There was a little bit of an argument because he, not arguing, but he wanted for 48 hours. He thought Teal'c Interrupted would be appropriate. Yes. Do you remember this? You're like, yes. No, we're not going with that one.
Yeah. Again, I can't attribute this to any one person, so I don't remember whose voice this was. But I know there were occasionally debates about whether the titles were too irreverent, and kind of puns on movies started to feel a bit like we weren't taking things seriously enough. I mean, I remember that conversation going on. Segue to 200 right now.
That's exactly right. A lot of conversations in 200. Thank you for teeing that up. In the writer's room ended up as banter in that briefing room scene that kind of threads the narrative throughout the show. And I want to ask a question that's been driving certain sectors of fandom nuts throughout the years. Do you consider 200 to be established continuity with the rest of the season, or is it out of continuity? You know, there's little hints, like when Gary Jones goes around the corner in one shot and then he comes through and he's fully dressed, you know, that's like, okay, this is probably not actually happening. This is just a fun episode. Where do you stand on 200 continuity?
Wow, I've never actually thought about that.
I'm glad to surprise you.
Obviously, the clips are just fantasy. They're fictional imagination from the script that Martin wrote. Like the script within the within the show. But to me, that happened.
The boardroom and the scene after, and the post scene with all of them shooting 10 seasons.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, Wormhole Extreme in the Stargate universe actually was made. Martin was a real character in the Stargate lore, and him inventing that show and then subsequently trying to make a movie and then ultimately making the show.
Okay.
I mean, to me, that actually happened in Stargate. If you were able to drop into the world of the show and ask somebody if they had seen Wormhole Extreme, they might be aware of it.
Party hats, streamers, all the fixings for Colonel Mitchell's 200th trip through the Stargate.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, if you could just give us credit for making that episode chock full of references and celebrations of everything we had sort of been through on the show. I know there were certain segments that fans felt maybe were pointing out weaknesses in the series, or maybe thumbing our noses at them. I don't think that's the right mix of metaphors, but yeah, I mean, you know, the Furlings thing was certainly
that's right. Give them what they want. Let them see it in some form. You know, Jack and Sam getting married. You know, if she doesn't come up here, they're going to think you and I are.
I don't know if I've told this story before, so forgive me. We have done a few of these, but
that's right.
When I was being interviewed for the job for Dirk Gently, a little plug for another show I worked on, I had to fly down to LA to meet the team of producers, so that they could, you know, I had done some initial interviewing and work online, and phone calls and stuff with the studio. So, but I had to go meet the production team, all the exec producers, and Max Landis. And I walk into a boardroom, you know, with a bunch of people in it, including Max. And before anyone could say anything, including hello, Max said, "When are we going to meet the Furlings?"
Wow.
And I was like,
you've struck a chord in the cultural zeitgeist.
Well, he's a science fiction fan, and I think he's definitely, if nothing else, someone who would have done a little homework online about me, and you know, but I know he said he watched the show and was kind of a fan. So
that's great. I remember with Darren in your office with Brad, and we said, "What's this thing about?" And there's concept art laid out of the Furling monitor. You guys were going through something at the time, and we said, "So what are we doing here?" And Brad said, "We're making puppets. We're going there." How did that idea come about? Was it even feasible? I mean, these things are not cheap. I've heard in some cases they're like $20,000 a puppet.
Are you talking about the the actual puppets, the marionettes for this. That's
Yeah.
it's not the Furling sequence, because the
Right.
Furling sequence also had the
Yeah.
costume. Yeah, no, the puppets. We were huge fans of Team America. You know, not politically correct.
Right.
But also, you know, making fun of certain things that were needed to be made fun of. Yeah, it was just brilliant, and we laughed our heads off at that repeatedly and quoted it all the time. And I think it's, you know, I think it's on Malatsi's blog that, you know, we were all talking about it, the movie
Mm-hmm.
in and around that time, and Joe brought up that he knew the guys who made those puppets. And I think Martin Wood had some connection to it as well. He had done some work with them as well. And, you know, we just kind of did one of those, can we do this?
Should we do this?
Yeah. And the fact that Daniel is the lead in Team America, like the puppet is the guy, you know, the main guy in Team America. It is Daniel. Because we just repurposed some of them.
Oh, really? So you took some of the puppets from so they're not all original.
No,
I did not know that.
Is the lead of Team America.
Oh, they just changed the hair.
Not even that much.
Wow. I
like
didn't
him.
even
They
consider
put
that. I thought they were all
they put
original.
Yeah, Gary, who is the lead character in Team America, is Daniel Jackson. Yeah.
Wow. Man, oh man. Were any of the puppets created from scratch?
Oh yeah, no, other ones were.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, for sure. But some of them were just, well, he looks like him.
Yeah, I think Dawn was specific. Like Dawn was such a unique look. I'm pretty sure he was original, and I'm pretty sure the Richard Dean Anderson one was original too.
Wow. Do you know what happened to any of them?
I think Rick got one of the Richard Dean Anderson ones.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh man, then
there was one of the execs from MGM kept the other one.
Oh, okay. Okay. Could this have been Charlie?
It was Hank who was around at the time.
Oh, okay. Very good. That's amazing. Which sketch is your favorite? Which sketch did you write? Because everyone took a slice of the pie, and which ones are your favorite?
Well, I wrote I wrote the Furlings one, and I
Sure.
wrote the younger, better looking SG-1 one.
The teens?
Yeah.
I love that sequence, Rob. That's right. Corey Monteith, may he rest in peace.
Yes,
he did a great job.
Exactly. Well, so many people, you know, it's crazy, actually, to be honest with you, how many people we miss now who are in the show.
Yeah.
Including Willie Garson.
That's right.
Which makes me sad every time I go back and look at it or think about it. And then look, we all gang wrote a lot of it. You know, we all participated in quite a few of the scenes together. But those two were the two I think I took away and did the initial work on.
How long did it take to settle on the idea for them, the Furlings? Or did someone just say, well, koalas are cute, let's make a big koala?
Yeah, I don't think it was it didn't. I remember James Robbins walking in with a picture, like a drawing of them, and I think it was the first one he did, and I just laughed my head off and said, "Yeah, that's pretty good."
Oh, it's terrific. It's we get to see something. I mean, had they actually existed, I assume that they would be something quite opposite from fur, like tall, spiny, maybe with wings.
I do. Yeah, I mean, there were conversations about that. Maybe there was a drawing that kind of ran counter to the name, but he probably asked me, you know, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
And that felt like one that should be right on, you know, hitting the nail right on the head.
I heard that there was a Gilligan's Island sketch that was thrown about. Were there any others that you remember that didn't make the cut?
I mean, there was a written version of the Gilligan's Island sketch. We just didn't have room for it.
I would love to see it someday. I'm just saying.
Joe posted some dialogue on his
Okay.
blog. Yeah, I think it's he just sent it to me because I was asking him about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's the I can tell you, and it's like October 3rd, 2011, and October 1st, 2011.
Okay, I'll post links.
He's a two-parter talking about the missing scenes and some of the backstory of stuff. Yeah.
What a resource. Absolutely. The wedding scene for Jack and Sam, that's full of crew members, isn't it? Is there anything in particular that you remember from that particular beat?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. I mean, I also, the other things that I really kind of was into what was the sort of in-between stuff, like the self-referential jokes about the writing of the movie. Those were the kinds of things I was really excited about.
I didn't know anything about hanging a lantern or a couple of the other.
That was a Glassner thing. Glassner from day one, Glassner would talk about hanging a lantern on things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
the audience
I'm sure
will
he didn't make it up, but he was the one who brought it into the Stargate world.
I've heard it since, for sure,
Yeah.
in separate, complete circles. So there, and it hangs together very well with Wormhole Extreme in that way, in that, you know, it touches on those things that the show just avoided. Like, why not? They speak English, and why don't I fall through the floor when I'm, you know, out of phase?
There's just something so you know, fun and also kind of exciting and gratifying to be able to convey the experience that you have making a show sometimes, you know, like either the frustration with you know, notes you get, or just the reality of making a science fiction show and some of the crazy stuff you have to, you know, justify or find a way to make work. And you have these conversations a lot with crew members too, who will like look at you and go, well, why are we doing this that way? And it's like, just go with it. Just
We have our reasons. We have a master plan.
We have to shoot something.
That's so true. Oh gosh. I remember the episode aired. There's some continuity question here, because I've had conversation with Christopher Judge about this. You may be able to clarify, but if it stays muddy, that's fine. The episode aired on a Friday. I think it was on a Monday that Gateworld published SG-1 has been canceled and Atlantis has been renewed. Christopher Judge then says, during the 200th episode party, in the same breath as congratulations on 200, oh, by the way, you know, it's been a great run. How long was there between you knowing that the show was canceled and the audience finding out when the 200th episode aired? And what did you guys have anything to do with when that was announced?
It was all happening at the same time.
Okay.
And I think if anything, Brad and I were trying to mitigate what we understood obviously would be disappointing.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, you know, you also go, wait a minute, we made 200 episodes of television, and that was something to celebrate, and nobody expects the show to go 10 years, let alone 11. So it was important to us, and look, Charlie was around then at that point, and when we said, okay, look, we definitely want to have this cast and the show live on, even though we were going to continue to do Atlantis, and that's when the sort of the you know, movie ideas were born.
Yeah, I to this day will will see people posting online saying, you know, it's just so unfair. It is so unfair that that SG-1 got canceled and that we didn't get any more. And it's like, do you hear yourself? You had 350 episodes of an extraordinary franchise. Who gets that for something that they love as much as you appear to? Recognize how fortunate you are that it went as long as it did. What an incredible gift to have for something that you enjoy.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. The Shroud.
It's the sort of thing where I like, to me, if you did it slowly enough, you could watch it and then forget what the first season was about and go back and start again.
And there are a lot of people who do. I'm done. Now I'm starting over. That's funny. The Shroud, co-written by Brad.
I gotta tell you, that one, I was thinking about that one, and I don't even know why I got a credit on it. Like,
really?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there was some back and forth with another idea that had some crossover, and I honestly don't remember. That's a question for Brad.
Okay.
That episode was like 100% Brad as far as I'm concerned. I look at that one and I go, "What? Wait, why did I get a credit on that? I don't remember."
There's the reverse is true too. Martin Garrow and I talked about the powers that be. And he has, I'm pretty sure, sole credit on that. I don't think he shares it with you. But he said to me, like, there was something that happened. Either he was too busy with another script, or something had happened to him. And he said that, you know, even though his name is on that episode, which I think is a great episode, it's a courtroom episode for the first chunk of it. He says that really is Robert Cooper's episode.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We often, the finished versions of scripts went through a number of typewriters in some cases. And yes, I mean, we were all very busy making 2 shows, 40 episodes. And again, I don't remember the specific circumstances around that one, but it is definitely true that, you know, Martin may have been, it could have been around the time Martin was directing an episode or writing and directing an episode of Atlantis, and you know.
Yeah, you take care of each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I want to talk a minute about some visual effects. I've had
By the way, you know, that's something that I kind of really learned from Brad and Jonathan, and was very much the case on Stargate as a whole, that you know, as coming up as a younger writer, you get rewritten. But not everybody continues to give credit to that original writer. Oftentimes, and it's not a question of ego and who gets the credit. It's a matter of who gets paid, you know, and who gets the residuals in the long run. So as a showrunner, it's your job to make sure the script that gets to set is the one that's best for the show. But there are definitely cases of situations in the business where, people end up getting that money taken away from them.
Wow. The name that's on the episode, that's the person who gets the residuals? There's no like, well, I wrote this, but in the back end, you know, okay. That's how it is.
The person whose name is on the script, and who's on the credited for it, gets the script fee and residuals.
For all syndication, for all time.
And it's just, you know, it's just bad form. I mean, the person has come in and has done a lot of work that's gotten them the job. And I cannot think of very many situations in which a credit was taken away from the original writer. there were a couple, but in those cases, we're talking about, a page one rewrite that
I see.
would have either like there were I cannot remember any case in which there's a formal process of arbitration that will determine these things as well. So with the union, you can submit drafts, and there will be an independent jury that will look at those scripts and then assign credit.
Wow.
We never had that happen, as far as I can remember, on the show. So in a couple of cases, I do think we approached the writers and said, here's the situation. What do you think? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And they would have had to approve it or agree to the credit.
Well, I can imagine you don't want to leave anyone with a horrible taste in their mouth, but at the same time, if someone is not working out with a specific script, what are you going to do?
Right.
This is a creative process, but on the other hand, this is a business.
No, like there's a
business must run.
And it's not something that doesn't have a mechanism that is predetermined legally. So for example, this is all way too much in the weeds for
I love this, man. Well, this is fantastic.
Back in the old days, people used to write freelance scripts. So they weren't necessarily always on staff. So we would have people pitch the show an idea, and then they would deliver something, and we would either use it or not. But there were also situations where there's a step deal, so they might get cut off at the outline stage, in which case they get a story credit, but someone else writes the script. And so then the credit, you'll see a split credit on the episode. and that may be why, because they wrote an outline, for whatever reason, it wasn't going in the right direction, but we used elements of it in the episode and didn't want to take the work that they did and the credit away from them. So they get credit for story. And someone else writes the script, or they turn in a draft that isn't quite up to snuff, and then someone else rewrites it enough that you end up with a split credit. Those things are all, nobody's doing anything under the table or backhanded to anybody. They're all sort of done with the agreement of the representation and frankly the contract that's been set out. Now, that's not saying I'm encouraging anybody to go back and try and dissect the credits on Stargate and figure out what happened, because it's all different. But I'm just saying I think, to me, we were always incredibly fair, and in many cases, writers kept credit when there was a rewrite that was done.
Absolutely. So from a novice perspective, when we're looking at written by so-and-so and so-and-so versus story by and teleplay by, on the back end, the financial percentages are dialing around.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I remember an instance where there was a director that just wasn't working, and Brad had to come in, on either the weekend or a few extra days and take over. And, that person just never returned. And there's, you have to, as the showrunner, you have to step in sometimes and put out fires in order to make things work. And as the audience member, if you did your job right, you never know.
Yeah,
absolutely. Visual effects I want to touch on just for a beat. I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of these folks, and the work that they did was absolutely extraordinary. What do you do when a visual effect doesn't necessarily work? And I want to get down to brass tacks with you. The dragon in the quest, for me, was a little anticlimactic. I mean, and it's not fair to judge it against Harry Potter and Game of Thrones, which came out later. But when you have something, when you look at that, is part of you like, this is what we've gotten, so this is what we're going to run with? I'm very curious. Or can you just say, no, this is not acceptable? And,
it 100% comes down to money.
Okay.
I mean, you're literally paying for time, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're on a payphone and you got only a certain number of quarters, and at some
Yeah.
point, the operator is going to cut you off. For those of you who don't know what a payphone is, I'm sure Google will
Show
have
you
somewhere,
pictures.
yeah, in the depths of the archive, be able to explain it. It's money. I mean, you have a budget that you have to adhere to, and the way it works is you you design the idea as best you can in terms of drawings and in terms of a budget. You have a visual effects supervisor who is great at their job, who looks at that, looks at the number of shots, and then puts an estimated budget per shot of what that's going to cost. And then it has to be shot a certain way in order to
Yeah.
achieve that. And sometimes the director didn't shoot it the way they were supposed to, and
Oh
that affects
yeah.
the budget. And that changed dramatically over the course of the series. Like we were on so long that you used to have to do motion control with a track and all this crazy stuff, and then you got down to just putting X's on something in order to track it, and then there was no need for it at all. So it's like you would have this change in how things were done. But at the end of the day, you got this number, and then it got shot, and then the rubber hit the road, and people took the design and started to try and execute it. And that's when you get into someone who is making, the visual effects house that we hire is got a human being sitting at a computer, and they're costing whatever, $250 an hour to push a bunch of buttons. And sometimes they're good at their job, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes their interpretation of what it is good, and sometimes it's not. And so, and sometimes we have overreached in terms of what we're asking for the amount of money that's been allotted. And so you get something back and you look at it, and the truth of the matter is the first version is usually not great.
Yeah.
It's usually also just for like position and animation, and it's not really finished. Like the leap that the very first version of a visual effect you see to the finished version in the show is often quite dramatic. Like the final, texturing and lighting and stuff makes a huge difference. So there's also a certain amount of trust you put in. And then, so look, again, money, I say money, but money also equals time in television. So the faster you need it, the more it's going to cost. And it comes down to these hours. And so what happens is you have a delivery schedule. So you have to deliver the show at this point. And you have a certain amount of money you have to spend up until that point. But then at that point, you're kind of done. You have to deliver it. Like, it's like, even if I had the money, even if I had another $1 million to put into this visual effect, the show, boom, the show is being delivered. It's out the door. It's got to go on the air. So there were times where, we just got to the end of the runway and it's like, oh, plane's taking off.
Yeah. Yeah, this is what we've got.
Yeah, this is it. There were times when I would ask for breakage or, go over budget because the thing didn't work. And, there were not that many times when there were a few, like Uninvited. I mean, the creature in Uninvited.
The bear creature, yeah.
Bear creature. I mean, there was nothing about that I liked. I'm not trying to throw any under the bus, but like that just didn't come out. I don't think we were technologically really ready for that level of 3D realism in the show, like to ask for that level of 3D realism with a creature. I mean, even today I see a lot of creatures, I'm like, oh, I don't believe that really exists in that space. So
yeah,
even with our technology today, 10, 15 years later, it's still not quite there. So we would overreach at times. And I think we've had this conversation before too, that with Universe, we really made a concerted effort to say from the get-go, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do something that we don't believe we can achieve with an acceptable amount of success. And so we held off on Aliens for a long time.
Yeah.
And then it was Image Engine that kind of came to us and said, hey, we have this model that's being essentially a feature film model that's being used for a movie, and we can skin a new alien on that and give you something that we could not have built for you on your budget from the ground up.
Wow. It's the prawns from District 9. Right. So those kinds of elements, behind the scenes could arrive you at a starting place further down the track than you had.
A ton of R&D work on the creation of the creature was used to build that. And in fact, it existed. And the other thing that existed was they had created an infrastructure within the company of artists, like basically people on salary, that for a gap of time were not being used. It was costing them money to have them, sitting there doing nothing. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but you kind of get the idea.
Yes.
So, and they had a movie coming up that they were going to be using. So they had a window of time where they could put these very talented people and an already kind of half-built concept to work. So yeah, a lot of times, us, the kind of grinding TV show got to benefit from some maybe feature R&D that led to a much more successful, realistic-looking visual effect that we could never have afforded to do ourselves from the ground up.
Was that the same thing that could be said for the White House from X2? This asset exists over here in this place.
Well, that was a set. That was not a visual effect, but
Correct.
That was definitely
what but it's here. We can use this.
Yeah, it's a production value. I mean, look, I'd say I don't know how many shows it impacted. There was a massive set built for Blade.
Yep.
In the biggest stage we had on the bridge, and we just took that infrastructure and turned it into God knows how many different. It was the village in a bunch of stuff in SG-1, and then became a giant part of Atlantis. Like it's we were always repurposing stuff for the sake of money. So I think we got a lot of production value out of our willingness to take whatever we could.
When something is coming along, and one of the artists, be it visual effects, be it some other form, and someone is struggling with it, is it basically anticipated that someone's going to come to you saying, "This is where we're at with this right now," or is it kind of, is there any level of, this is not the word I want, but bullshit, where it's like, yeah, we've got this, and then they present it to you, and it's like,
I mean,
this, you got
really
this.
You should really have, some of the visual effects people. I don't know, maybe you have had
Craig Vanden Bigler and a couple others.
Yeah, but like I hope we were fair. But a lot of times, look, I remember a lot of times where guys would come in and women as well.
Mm-hmm.
Michelle Cummins was an amazing effects supervisor for us. And it would be like, okay, look, I know this is not quite what you asked for. It's not there yet. Don't react. Just look at the position. Just look at where it is in the frame. Just look at, like, they would apologize for it before they even showed it to me. I always knew kind of what stage I was looking at. And there were a lot of times where, it's a leap of faith. Like, this is going to look better by the time it needs to be approved as a final.
Mm-hmm. John Godetsky showed us the Lego animations for Rising, and they are adorable. They're absolutely so cute. You got to
Yeah.
start somewhere and then work your way in. This is the general idea. Are we good on these shots? We're good. Okay, now we'll proceed. Because you
Yeah.
don't want to spend money down, just throw it down a hole and be like,
Yeah.
we need to tweak this. So there are steps.
But it was the it was an incredible process that you learn that the people who aren't as experienced in this, often on the studio and network side, who look at the first cut, who look at the early mixes and don't, you know, how should I put it? In a positive way, I would say it was almost uniform that by the time the show was finished, the estimation of people went up so high, like where that when they first saw a cut, they would be like, I didn't realize it was going to be this good.
Yeah.
And then they see it with the visual effects finished and the music and the full mix, and they're like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. John Godetsky was, I didn't realize that you guys managed to get a lot more mileage, not for instance, not by Enemy at the Gate, but certainly at Rising, by not rendering the visual effects in full high definition. It was crunched vertically a little bit and then expanded into 16:9 to get a few more shots that you didn't have before out of the budget. Because he's showing me these renders, and the renders aren't 16:9; they're more squished.
Yeah. So everything is. I mean, it's on so much of a different scale nowadays. I have conversations about the kind of processing and the amount of energy that takes to get that kind of processing with AI now. All the technology that we're kind of watching evolve, and it's no different. Like you were again, it was literally pennies per microsecond of how long it took to render something, how much processing power did they have. Some of these shots would take literally days. So like you would press the button to do the finished version and it would be hours and hours and hours. And so if it came out the other end and was like, oh shit, this doesn't look quite the way we want it, and your delivery was that Wednesday and it was a Tuesday, you're kind of stuck with it.
And if the render can crash too, Craig was saying that it can crash and they have to start over.
Right, and it's a cost issue where you're evaluating. You're sort of saying, do I have the money to redo this one shot and make it a little better, or I can put that into XYZ in the next episode and make that episode good. So you're always, it's not like a movie where it's like you live and die on that one thing. You're balancing it all out with the whole show. So, I'm sure there was a point at which we were like, could the dragon be better? Maybe. But what's going to suffer because we went that extra mile with the dragon?
Here's a question. Were there funds, the SG-1 and the Atlantis funds, were they allocated separately, or could one show feed the other if it was going over budget?
Oh, the only reason Atlantis ever got made was because we had both shows running. So
right, for sets for sure, but I was curious, like for other things like visual effects, money earmarked for those things.
Sure. Models, like things like that were built. Wardrobe was a huge one. So no, I mean, look, it was also having like one office, one art department, one writer's room. All those things created efficiencies. Nobody was being shortchanged in terms of not getting paid for the work they were doing, but you can only work so many hours in a day. And so yes, if we could generate the work for, like, not double, but maybe 1.5 the work in the time, it would save tons of money. And then there was also like things like rentals, like stage rentals, and maybe maybe Atlantis would get shot in the stage for a day that SG-1 was paying for on the long run. Like there's a
Yeah. Martin Garrow talked about Trio, where this was an episode that was designed to be a little bit smaller budget, from the outset. It wasn't specifically to cost money per se, but it was meant to be kind of a smaller story. And when it got to the execution, there was just like something, not everything worked as expected. And I sit there, as an audience member going, well, if it doesn't work, where do you get the money? I guess you get the money from the next thing. And try to dial things around where you can, just to keep the train on the track that you want. So,
yeah, for sure. And look, I think we were successful because we were pretty good at planning ahead and earmarking the right amount of money for the right things. And, I think I probably often got accused of maybe reserving some of the more special things for my shows that I was writing and directing. But
you're the co-creator. Too bad. Yeah. I mean, there's Satita is so damn memorable. Everything comes. You and Brad created this thing together. The tentpole stuff. And you know what you want to see, and as an audience member, it's like, this is great, this works.
Yeah. So, like, for example, Time.
Yeah.
That we built this indoor jungle, and that was a big expense. Like, I vaguely remember a number like $300,000, which was not in our normal set budget for an episode. But then, and that episode used that set, obviously the most, but then it was used multiple times over the season. So we found ways to continue to get mileage out of those expenditures.
What about stars? I know that there's a guest star budget that's typical for an episode. You can get a number of extras and everything else, and it's locked into there's a coffer for that. And someone comes along who's available. I imagine there were instances where, they would come to you and say, my family really loves this show. I'm willing to do it for this because I want to make something for them. Or were there other instances, well, they're asking for this much, but I mean, they're so-and-so, and can we do it?
Yeah, I think most cases, casting, particularly, US casting, which would look at more name guest stars, knew our budget. So they would propose people that they knew were gettable for the amount we had. In some cases, we would be like, oh, this is special. Who can we get that might require what we call in the business breakage, which is when you're actually going above what your budget is. And then breakage is when you essentially have approval from the studio to spend more than you plan to.
Wow.
And there were situations where we kind of went a little higher to get the more namey person.
Yeah.
I mean, in some cases, that sort of situation was going to Rick. Like, once he had left the show, there were a couple of cases where we wanted to bring him back, where the network actually asked to bring him back because it was so promotable. And like with 200, for example.
That was the network's idea to get him in.
Well, no, I mean, they were always happy about that.
I
and
see.
Certainly we didn't, it's not like we didn't want him in 200. We didn't know how we could make a 200th episode without him.
Right.
But that was a scenario where everybody, the studio and the network, all knew that was what it was going to cost. It wasn't just, was Rick available? It's were we willing to pay what it would cost to get him back? So
there'll be spoilers. Are you kidding? It'll be in the commercial. That's great. I remember David Ogden Stiers. I regret not ever talking to him for his role as Oberoth. I thought he was a great villain. He drove up from Oregon. And you guys were perfectly willing to fly him in. He's like, no, he enjoyed the drive.
Yeah.
That's kind of wild. Unending we've talked about a little, but we have arrived at the end, whew, of our SG-1 overview. And there are specific stories that I know
I'll tell you
exist
that
that we've
that
not.
title was one I definitely struggled with.
Why?
Well, no, to come up with. I did that one was not immediately obvious to me, and was only later that I kind of figured that one out. And even once I pitched it, I don't remember getting universal approval of it. Yeah, I don't remember what some of the other options were, but that was one that was not initially easy. I didn't come in with that title when I pitched it.
Well, I think it leaves the nugget of the idea that, you know, in some way, even though like in some episodes, you know, or shows, you know, Amanda's now over here on the Hammond, you know, Rick is in so and so. There's a team always going through.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the adventure never stops.
The documentary we were making about the real Stargate program was going to stop, but the actual real Stargate program was going to continue.
Uh-oh, SWAT here. You better look out. You over on Gate World, we have the story, and I want it here. You kept encountering CCR. Have you ever seen the rain?
Yeah.
Tell me that story again.
I wish I remembered that full story. I think it was really one of those, you know, there were a couple of cases where there were like fun coincidences of just, I would talk about something and then I would get in the car and that song would just come on the radio. Like, that's a weird.
It's meant to be.
Yeah, I don't necessarily believe in that stuff, but I also feel like it's kind of like the fact that I'm excited about that coincidence means that that's the right choice. Like that I like it enough to get excited about that coincidence, you know? So, yeah, look, I got excited on a number of occasions about a particular song. I mean, it was the score that we ended up landing in, you know, in the Atlantis episode that
Vegas.
Vegas.
That was full of music.
Yeah, yeah, and that was some breakage that I got some approval for.
Yeah.
So,
but with CCR, you'd not really. We had a couple of pop songs, like in pieces, like at the end of Fragile Balance, when young Jack goes into school. We'd never had a song like this at this point.
We never had a music supervisor who would, like, on other shows, like on Unspeakable, for example. I had a music supervisor who would, on every episode, in every situation, pitch me music and say, "Here's." We had that on Dirk Gently as well. There would be a dedicated person who would say, "Here's besides score, here's music that you could use in the show." Yeah, we never did that, and I think it was maybe because music has a way of dating things, and it also maybe in some ways never felt right in science fiction. Although I personally think one of the things that made Stargate so relatable was that it was taking place in our world, and therefore had music in it and should have had music in it. But yeah, there was some resistance and some intention about making the show feel more timeless, and that music makes it of a particular time.
If you could, with the success of CCR, and I want to talk about that montage momentarily, would you have added a song here or there earlier on in SG-1's run?
Maybe. I mean, we did start doing it on SGU. Like, we ended up having a music supervisor on SGU and bringing that to the mix. Yeah. I think CCR worked because it was a classic song. So it was already like, it wasn't a modern song. It was something that was from another time.
Yeah, a lot of these guys would have grown up with that song. So yeah, Mitchell certainly, and Carter certainly would have.
Yes. So that's why I felt it was fine.
Yeah.
And yeah, look, I've spoke at length about the contributions, and you know, you almost can't weigh how much, you know, Joel and his music meant to the show.
Oh God.
But there's also something about a familiar song
Uh-huh.
that hits you completely differently than score.
Uh-huh. We're watching this show, and CCR have you ever seen The Rain represents the beginning and the entrance into a loss of sanity for some of the characters. I remember you and Browder having the discussion about whether or not we should show a scene of Mitchell losing control.
Right.
Because he's our hero, you know, and there are certain boundaries that a typical.
And he did not want to do the scene where he tears the room apart, which is funny because when you think about these things in retrospect, when I wrote it, I thought, oh, he's gonna love doing this. Like I literally expected him to really want to do that scene, but he just felt it was a betrayal of his character.
Mm-hmm. He was the guy who could always be, you know, counted on to stand firm. But at a certain point, so he did it, you know, with reservations, or did you win him over with the idea?
I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, I won him over. He did it, but
okay, sure. Well, I would think, you know, there's certain things like creatively, I disagree with this, but Coach,
yeah,
we're gonna go with this.
I think that to some extent was the case, but I also think that he understood where I was coming from, and it wasn't a complicated argument. I'm like, yes, you are this person. So imagine how far you have to have been pushed to get to the point where you would do this, and that is what I'm hoping the audience will also feel. It's like, oh my God, if he's doing this, that's how crazy the situation must be.
Yeah, they are stuck in amber for years.
We had a finite amount of time. You know, when you think about it, there's a setup and the resolution and whatever. You have about 30 minutes of screen time to tell the story about people being stuck that long. There has to be shortcuts dramatically to give someone the impression that it's not just being handled in a blasé way, you know?
No, it certainly wasn't. And I'll get to that in just a moment. I remember watching the scene. Michael and I spoke a little bit about this a couple of months ago. The scene at the foot of the bed with Vala and Daniel. And it's meant to be largely ambiguous. You may disagree with that to a degree, but I remember sitting in the office with you guys after the next season, and Darren and I were with you. We were talking about this scene, and when I had watched it as a viewer, I'm 18, 19, and 20, and I was like, oh, she's upset about something. And then you and Darren were talking, and Darren asked you, you know, was it kind of your intent that this was a miscarriage? And I remember sitting there going, oh my God, I didn't even think of that. Didn't even occur to me until that moment. And my eyes were kind of like, it's when you in real time realize something in a new way that you didn't before. I'll never forget that.
Yeah. I didn't want to unpack everything that goes around that in that moment. I mean, there's that, you know, you should and could do whole series about what people go through in those situations. And but yeah, I think it added a layer of texture to, again, the ordeal that these people were experiencing.
Were you satisfied with the makeup job when they get older?
I would be lying if I said I was. I'm never that satisfied with that stuff.
Okay.
Look,
was there a rush at the end? Do you wish that there was some more R&D time? Just a tight schedule?
With that, you know, it's the same as the visual effects conversation. You know, there's a certain amount of money, a certain amount of time, and makeup like that is tough because of shooting schedule too, and you know, it's not like you have, like with the Penguin, where they had 5 or 6 hours a day to do the makeup, and then you only have the person for 3 hours. I mean, we couldn't do that kind of
Mm-mm.
schedule. Um, one day on a set for a television show, when your typical budget includes 7.5 days,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you can't. If you go to 10 days, you're increasing the cost of the most of the budget of the show by
Mm-hmm.
half. Just can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, why did it come out the way it did? I mean, it's hard. That's a hard thing to do,
Yeah.
and I think I'm I remember thinking that the people who did that work did the best they could,
Yeah.
and I certainly understood what the limitations were going to be throughout. Um,
And it's not just makeup and performance. There's also, or physical performance. There's a vocal element too. One of the things that I personally always notice is that people's voices change as they get older. And I thought it was interesting that, specifically Amanda, she chose to go in a little bit of a higher register. So,
but
she's,
look, everything is time, right?
yeah,
Everything is time, and time equals money, so everything is money. Lighting can make a big difference too, and I'm not throwing the DPs under the bus, because they also have a certain amount of time. If they could have had an extra hour for every setup to light it properly, you wouldn't have seen it the way you saw it. So much of it goes into, like when you see a successful aging makeup in a feature film and try to compare that to a television show, it's just not fair. You
that's
know,
right.
they have a completely different budget, schedule, scenario, and they can also, you know, fly the best of the best person for that particular discipline in. I mean, we did it years later. I did a lot of makeup on Unspeakable as well, and um, you know, I I I don't think that hurt the drama. Like, I
Hmm.
still feel like people could watch the show and get what I wanted them to get out of it. Um, so
This is a heavy episode. You're not left with watching this episode, at least I'm not, and I don't think you meant it to be, oh joy. You switch to the exterior of the ship and you see the plasma blast get closer as the time passes. And for me there's kind of like a, oh, they're still stuck. And you cut inside and they're dealing with this trauma of not being able to do anything but just pray that Sam comes up with a solution. But they're still in it together. They don't resent one another. And I think that
yeah,
that's one of the core things about the show that stands really true, is that they don't turn on one another.
right.
They find a place to cope with each other. And I think that that's beautiful.
Thank you. I mean, I think that reflected how, when I talk to people, when I meet people who worked on the show, uh, almost universally, they're like, that was the best experience I ever had working on the show. And to make a show is incredibly stressful. It's certainly not brain surgery or soldiering through real war. It is, but it is it's an endeavor that takes a lot of is stressful and takes a lot of commitment, and people are often at the end of their rope in terms of their sleep and mental health and all
Mm-hmm.
those things. And so you get a lot of drama that and acrimony that comes out of making television and film, and a lot of things don't go well. And we managed to work really well together for a very, very long time. And I think the vast majority of people who worked on the show had a positive experience. And I think that in some ways reflects what you're talking about. That part of the reason people loved the team and loved the show is because even with their differences and disagreements and differing opinions. They still liked each other a lot. In some cases, loved each other, and found a way to get along and win. And I thought that was going on behind the scenes too. So I'm glad that came across.
The final scene was deliberately kept toward the end of the shoot, where,
by the way, making the show felt like unending. Like it just really felt
really
very much like it had gone on forever. Oh yeah, I mean, 10 years is a long time, and we definitely,
I would suppose creatively at a certain point, some people would be like, I'm doing well financially for this, but creatively at a certain point, I would be hitting a wall.
Well, Brad and I have often said, and I think I've said it on here, that we did try and end the show in season 7, and they wouldn't let us. So
I'll make you an offer you can't refuse.
Pulling us back in,
Jeez, that's great. You left the gate room scene for the end of shoot, and so many people who had almost never been to set in some cases showed up for this one. Was there an open invitation to come in and see it, or did people just stay at past midnight? By
the way, to this day, I will not forget how much shit I was getting from John Lennox, who was producing, because we were going over, not just over like an acceptable amount. We were about to go into something that would have triggered like another day of shooting
for this last day.
Yeah, well, for that scene.
Okay.
Like I was behind. I getting this right was important, and obviously it was the last shot of the show, so we couldn't come back and shoot it another time. That would have been really expensive. So going late was fine. And we were pausing for things like handshakes and goodbyes and celebration sort of stuff. And John was just like, I'm going to close this down if you don't get this shot by this time. Like
that's his job.
Tense.
Yeah.
All things understood. We got to get this done. And it was, I don't necessarily think anybody's going to hold our feet to the fire now in terms of unions and stuff, 15 years later, but, or more now, 18 years later. I think we went a little over.
But it was
I think we went a little past the point where we would have needed to pay a little more.
The photos are beautiful. They're dramatic. Did anyone speak after the final shot? Did you have a speech, or did any of the cast?
I think I said a few things. I think some people said some stuff. It was not very formal.
Yeah.
And everyone was exhausted too, because we had really had a long day.
Yeah, but everyone was going to go away and come back for Arc of Truth.
Yeah.
So you knew that everyone knew that there was something. You weren't striking anything. So,
no.
Yeah.
And Atlantis was continuing. I mean, yeah. So that
exactly. So there was going to be some back and forth. At least we were going to see Bo, possibly every now and then. What a great character, man. Arc of Truth. I think Joel's score was recorded in Seattle, if I'm not mistaken. You guys went down and watch it get performed, and I'm assuming Continuum.
That was for Atlantis. So when we did the Atlantis pilot, we had an orchestra, and we went down and saw that live. I remember going. It was the first time I had gone down to LA and sat with Joel in his studio in the back. He had a studio in the back of his house.
Yep.
Then, and I remember doing that for Arc of Truth too. It's the most incredible thing ever. Music is kind of like magic to me. I'm not really.
Yeah, you don't speak music.
I don't speak.
How often would you communicate with him on every episode, or would you do batches together? Would you communicate with
Oh
the
yeah, no, we had a spotting. We would have we had something called a music spotting, which is
Okay.
part of the process. So once you had a locked um, once you had a locked cut, you would do a music spotting, and you would literally go through the episode, and they would come to the table and have already. I mean, they were so good. They would literally watch an episode and tell us what we want.
Oh, Rick
Um,
Chaddock and Neil Acree and Joel.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
and it would be like they would be like, okay, we're in here, we're out here, we're in here, we're out here, and they would just have ins and outs, and then we would talk about where, like, oh, well, this dialogue, you know, and that would be like the most we would really often talk about it because they knew during action sequences they would be in, but there were often debates about whether they were going to play under dialogue scenes and what those cues would be. And so sometimes it'd be like, you know, I don't like wall-to-wall music. Let's have this just play and whatever. Or no, this scene needs a little help. It needs a little something extra to give it the emotion that we're going for. So yeah, we would literally to the 10th of a second figure out where his music would start, where it would end, what it would be, and then he would go away and do that. And by the time we got to the mix, the music would be in, and then we would make additions and changes as we go. So we'd go to like Rick was always in the mix.
Rick
Process.
Chaddock. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes Joel would need to like, and it was a rolling thing where he'd be working on the score for another episode while we were mixing one, or the score for two other episodes while we were mixing one, and so he'd be busy. But I'd say, look, this cue is not doing what we needed to do, or we need more here that we didn't think we did at the time we did the spotting. So Joel was often delivering cues during the mix process.
And one of the things a lot of people don't know, 2 versions for every episode. You got the commercial
That was
version
not that complicated, but yes, there was a point at which, the ins and outs of commercials and how you bridged the cut when there was no commercial was very different. It was like 4 or 5 little tweaks that you needed to do per episode.
Tracking music from earlier episodes. Was this would it go back and forth about, was it a budget thing, or was it like Joel says, we can use this here because this fits?
Oh, it both. Joel's like, I don't need to write new music. I have the music from the library that I can use. And you still get paid for it.
Yeah, and it's a theme. It's an established theme that you can fit into certain characters. And
it's just like he can only do so much. Like you can only write so much music. And so if he can fill something in that adds to it, because there is that sort of familiarity that makes you feel like you're watching a Stargate, and this is a moment that you might even think about that, like this is the hero moment for this character because this is their theme. Mm-hmm. There's no reason why you couldn't reuse some music. Mm-hmm. It happens a lot.
He was a master. I miss him all the time. You just have to put on a show and, you just think of him because he's a huge percentage of that equation.
Right.
The show would not, the franchise would look almost completely different emotionally. Yeah. Absolutely extraordinary, man. I rewatched a lot of our discussion before coming back to you, and I went and watched the scene from Space Race with your wife. God, she's funny. Well, was it like, we've got an opening here, do you want it? What was it like what was the conversation that led to that?
Yeah, I mean,
was so good.
I don't remember the impetus of it, but I mean, look, she had done some acting. That was what she wanted to do. And she's done some voice work. And I think she didn't really want to, at the beginning, feel like I had just, given her the part, sort of, so to speak. But yeah, eventually, I mean, as the show went on, I was like, come on, you got to be in an episode. And
she was, her banter with Rick is just so funny. I forgot how good that moment was. And his cousin Murray. Yes. So, Robert, Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for being willing to go into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts on things. You know, it's not, some of it's not as flashy, but it's like, oh, that's how this comes into be. That's how this works the way it does. And I love
Yeah.
having those conversations with you.
Hopefully, yeah, people get a chance to hear about what we go through on the production side, so they understand why the show ends up being what it is.
Rob Cooper, writer, director, executive producer of Stargate SG-1, Stargate Atlantis, and Stargate Universe. Hope you enjoyed that. There's always insight when Rob comes in, and he is one of the regulars on my show that I get so excited about because he's just so knowledgeable and he's funny. I appreciate y'all tuning in. Before you go, if you like what you've seen in this episode and you want to see more of it, please click like. It makes a difference with the show and will help us grow our audience. Please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click the subscribe icon. If you plan to watch live, I recommend giving the bell icon a click so you'll be the first to know of any schedule changes, which happen here and there. And bear in mind, clips from this live stream will be released over the course of the next few weeks. This was not a live stream. This was a pre-recorded interview on gateworld.net and the Dial the Gate YouTube channels. My tremendous thanks to my moderating team, Anthony, Jeremy, Marcia, Summer, Tracy, Raj, Lockwatcher, Linda Gategabber Fury, and Anthony Rowling, my producers, my webmaster, Frederick Marcoux over at Concepts Web, my transcribers who have been working diligently to archive the show over at dialthegate.com. If you want to join them, get in touch with me. There's a portal there to send me an email. I don't make the show in a vacuum, and we couldn't have gotten this far with all the help that everyone has given me. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate. I appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see you on the other side.